What you eat and when you eat undoubtedly has a huge effect on you as a hiker, whether it's from a performance aspect or just simply dropping the weight to make hiking or climbing more comfortable and more doable. Whether you've learned the hard way or you're just interested in learning more, I think you'll love this interview that I did with Max Lowery. Max is a fellow YouTuber and author and a subject matter expert on things like weight loss and intermittent fasting. I recently caught up with him in the Pyrenees to have a little adventure and to ask him the questions that you guys sent in from Instagram about nutrition for the mountains. Let's get into it. So my first question for you is around body composition.
Yeah.
Do you think there's an ideal body composition for a mountaineer or a hiker? And if so, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, certainly you want to have a relatively low body fat percentage.
Because the heavier you are, the harder things are going to be, right?
Exactly. You know, you're going to have to carry that extra weight up there. And once you start to get, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 meter plus mountains, then yeah, every gram counts. I think maintaining relatively low body fat, but not trying to be an extreme calorie deficit all the time, because that's going to have a definite effect on your performance. I think some people are afraid to have too low body fat because they think they need all the energy reserves that they can possibly get. But actually, even with 7-8% body fat, you're still going to have 50, 60, 70,000 calories worth of energy to tap into in the form of fat, because that's what fat is. It's stored energy. And then there's the question of, in terms of body composition, how much muscle mass you have. Like, I'm definitely someone that is on the heavier side for a mountaineer and a climber. I'm around 86 kilos now. I got down from 89. So you also want to be aware of that. You don't want to be carrying up a load of extra muscle. And I would say actually carrying too much muscle is going to be more difficult than carrying too much fat, because muscle is more energy demanding. You're going to have to fuel it with more food, and it also uses more oxygen. So of course, in high altitude, it's going to be more difficult as well. So there you go. The more muscle you have, the more energy it requires to force that muscle to work and get it up the mountain. It's a double-edged sword. I know that you don't want to be put into a box in terms of what you do for your diet, and neither do I, but you do intermittent fasting, so you have breaks where you don't eat. Yeah. Talk to us about how that's worked for you and how it's worked for your clients, and how that might change when you go into the mountains, when you're going for a hike or a climb. So I've been practicing intermittent fasting for almost 10 years now, actually. I just stumbled on it by accident. I didn't really know what it was, just started eating in this way when I was traveling around South America, and lost a ton of body fat. I was working in finance beforehand, so lost all the excess pounds that I put on in finance. But then more than that, I felt like I was less hungry overall, and I had more energy. So I then kind of got back to the UK, got into coaching, was very much doing it by myself, not advising it for my clients. And as time went on, more research came out, I got more experience, started to incorporate it into my clients, but realized putting a strict time frame on it with like 16-8, where you fast for 16 hours and eat for 8 hours, was a bit restrictive, and it made people obsessed with the clock. So I essentially started my own method, which I call the 2 meal day. I've got a book that came out in 2017.
So essentially you don't eat until like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then you have a nighttime meal, right? Yeah,
I mean, essentially, intermittent fasting means you're breaking your day or week up into periods of eating or not eating, rather than just waking up and eating continuously. Okay. With the 2 meal day, you're not focusing on the clock. You're trying to eat when you're hungry. Because I think that's where the power of intermittent fasting lies. It's teaching your body to understand the difference between hunger or not. Yeah,
so that was interesting, because I had a question on Instagram that came up around hunger, and how do you control the hunger pangs when you're doing intermittent fasting?
Well, that's the beauty of it. There's this misconception that intermittent fasting means you're starving yourself and depriving yourself. But actually, it's just about resensitizing your body and teaching your body to use its stored energy rather than, being dependent on a constant stream of food. And once you're able to tap into that stored energy, you actually feel less hungry overall. It does take some getting used to having an empty stomach, and people are mind blown when they realize that just because your stomach is empty doesn't necessarily mean you should eat. That doesn't necessarily mean hunger, but it's just what we associate with hunger. And you begin to recognize perceived hunger, so emotional hunger, boredom, environmental, habit, routine. And if you're just going about your day to day and eating regularly, you never think about that. But when you incorporate intermittent fasting, you're forced to think about that, and you feel perceived hunger come and go, and you realize that's not actually hunger, and eventually it will resensitize leptin and ghrelin, so essentially you're going to feel less hungry overall, and you're going to be more sensitive to the food that you're eating, so you're going to feel fuller for longer. So for me, everyone always talks about it as it's this magic pill for fat loss. Like, number one, I don't think it is a magic pill, but I think it's incredibly effective for getting you to listen to your body better, and I think that can mean long-term sustainable results with fat loss and optimal body composition.
So what about on hikes? So we're going to be spending 7 or 8 hours out in the mountains tomorrow. Is that going to change how you eat?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, this is another thing about intermittent fasting why I don't necessarily like labeling myself, is because you get put in a box, and it's like you're either doing it or you're not. And if you're not doing it, you're failing and you're never doing it again. But actually it's a tool that you use and incorporate as and when you see fit. So if tomorrow was just kind of a regular fun training thing, then I would fast in the morning, I wouldn't eat, and I'd just take food and break my fast later. But because this is new territory, we're probably going to be pushing it a bit. I will be eating probably overnight oats first thing in the morning. I mean, obviously you want to get yourself into a situation where potentially your body is efficient enough that you could go without food, but you still always want to have the food on you. And I found actually when I have done the hikes and I've really depleted my glycogen stores a lot, it just means you have to carry more food, it gets more complicated, you take more rests, or actually for longer, bit quicker stuff, I would say it's probably better to eat a bit more regularly throughout and not ever let yourself, the blood sugar drop too low.
So if you are, let's say, in a keto diet where you're teaching your body to rely on fat stores, does that mean that you can go on a hike and eat fat as like your fuel source?
Well, with keto, I mean, number one thing, you're always using a combination of different energy sources. It's going to be glycogen, it's going to be ATP, it's going to be fat, it's going to be the food that you're eating, that's the sugars that are circulating in the bloodstream. But obviously, depending on the intensity of the exercise, depending on your glycogen stores, the ratios of what you're using changes, and the ability in which you're able to change is called metabolic flexibility, and that is a really powerful trait, and that's what intermittent fasting does teach you. It teaches your body to be more metabolically flexible. With something like the keto diet, you are kind of metabolically inflexible in some ways if you do it in an extreme way for too long, because you become less able to deal with the carbohydrates because your body's not using them as much, and you're not exposing yourself to carbohydrates. Essentially, you're consuming a high-fat diet, which is calories, which is energy, but it's not going to it's going to be difficult to tap into that on top of your fat reserves, which you're already using. Keto has its benefits, I think, for a small amount of people. I think, but it's unsustainable for most people, and unenjoyable.
I think for mountain sports it might be a little bit difficult to maintain.
I think definitely you want to get yourself into a situation where your body is good at tapping into fat and using fat as a fuel source, but whether or not the keto diet is a way of doing that,
especially if you're doing aerobic training and you're an endurance kind of athlete, for sure.
Exactly.
So I have a question around supplements, because I'm not a big kind of supplement guy. We also had a question that came through on Instagram around what sort of supplements would you suggest for someone that's doing a really long trip, like a month-long through hike, or going to the Himalayas to climb for a month? What do you think are like the main kind of things that we need to look out for supplement-wise?
I would say a decent multivitamin, which I wouldn't usually recommend on a day-to-day basis, but when you are potentially going to be eating only a limited amount of food, limited amount of variety, having that multivitamin is going to be beneficial for long term.
Dal,
exactly. For people always focus on food as just calories in long distance trekking and month long, but actually the micronutrients are incredibly important. They're the things that are going to make the difference. So a multivitamin, I would say omega-3s if you can, some high quality omega-3 fatty acids, because that's going to help with inflammation from all the hiking, and it's going to assist with recovery. Vitamin D, I think, particularly boost the immune system, can boost energy levels. Vitamin C, zinc, which I would potentially take, maybe not every single day, but if you feel like potentially you're about to get ill.
But if you take a multivitamin, would that hit most of the
I think with
areas?
zinc, It would, but the way that I use zinc and vitamin C is more of a, if I feel like something's happening, I'll kind of take a lot.
Yeah. What do you mean, like you're feeling like you're getting ill? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just eat garlic when that happens.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
have like a whole clove of garlic.
I'll stay away from you then if you're feeling ill.
Yeah, you don't want to sleep in a tent with me when I'm eating raw garlic. All right, next question. So a common concern that I get asked a lot is, especially as a vegetarian, where do you get your protein? How can I get my protein as a vegetarian or a vegan? And so my question to you're a meat eater, right?
Yeah.
So how much protein should the average kind of person be eating? And then does that change if we're doing a lot of activity out in the mountains?
Well, for an active person who is looking to maintain muscle mass and improve body composition, so potentially reduce body fat percentage, 1.2 to 2 grams per kilogram of body weight. So it's quite a big difference there.
Yeah.
So, I'm 86 kilos. So on the upper end, that's going to be like 160, 170 grams of protein, which if you ask most guys, most bros doing a lot of lifting, that's nothing. That's half of what they're eating.
Yeah.
I've known people that eat 300 grams of protein in a day.
Damn.
Yeah, which
a lot of cows.
It's unsustainable, non-enjoyable, and I think just completely non-essential as well.
Chicken and broccoli and brown rice.
Yeah, exactly. So that's, for me, on the upper end, 160 grams or so. On the lower end, it could be 80, 90 grams of protein.
What are the repercussions if we don't get that when we're hiking?
Well, the chances are you're not going to get that when you're hiking.
Yeah.
I mean, and that doesn't really matter in a short term. If on a month-long expedition, then you're going to lose muscle mass, which you do. You can't stop that. You're never going to be able to consume the amount that you need. So it's just about getting as much in as you can in an effective way that isn't going to cause digestive issues or have to carry kilos of meat up a mountain. But I think it's important to address that the amount of protein that you need is often grossly exaggerated by protein companies, and the amount of protein that people think you need to be eating it's not reality. And this is why there are these questions and fear of, if you're vegetarian, you're going to be wasting away, where do you get your muscles from, how are you going to be strong? This is all propaganda basically from protein manufacturers. So take it from us, my entire training career, I haven't used protein. It's only recently I have started to use protein supplementation just on long hikes. That's pretty much the only time I would use it. But I get more than enough from my diet, and I eat 2.5 meals per day. And I'm 86 kilos and 8% body fat. Most of that is muscle. So genetics play a role, but you really don't need to be consuming as much as you think.
Can you explain what calorie deficit is for the total beginner?
Essentially, a calorie is a measure of energy, and when you're trying to lose fat, body fat percentage, or put on muscle, it helps if you are aware of whether or not you're in a calorie deficit, which means you are eating less than you are expending. So there's going to be a slight deficit there, which potentially means you're going to lose some body fat, some weight. Equally, if you're in a calorie surplus, it means that you're eating more than you're expending. So obviously that's beneficial if you're looking to put on mass. But a calorie deficit is beneficial and to be aware of for fat loss, but it's not the only reason, in my opinion. A lot of people think as long as you're in a calorie deficit, that's all that you need. But actually, I think there's lots of different variables that in the long term, if you want long-term fat loss, which is what I'm interested in, that anyone could do extreme things in the short term. For long-term fat loss, it's about the quality of the food that you're eating, the way that you eat food, your relationship with food, your sleep, your digestive enzymes, activity levels, your NEAT, lots of different variables, and yes, a calorie deficit.
Okay. Clears things up a lot. What's your go-to meal to eat before you have a big event?
So I personally love sweet potato.
I love sweet potato.
I eat a lot of sweet potato. So it'll be something a bit higher. So usually in the 48 hours before I'm going to do some kind of big endurance event, I will eat slightly more carbohydrates than I usually would. Usually the way I eat carbohydrates is higher on my training days and a bit lower on my less active days. But in the lead up, I will consume more. But the key is you don't need to go insane. People talk about carb loading, which is, forcing a load of carbohydrates down.
Everything there is.
Yeah, and that you don't need to do that. Eat a bit more, but the most important thing is don't eat anything you haven't eaten before. Don't start taking some gels or some shakes that you've never used before an event.
Totally mess you up.
Exactly. You've got no idea how that's going to affect your digestion, especially if you are using gels. That has some people really don't react well to those at all. So it doesn't need to be complicated. Some protein, higher carbohydrates. I personally like slower releasing carbohydrates like sweet potato, like beans, pulses, quinoa, things like that, rather than the kind of processed like white rice or bread. But that's just my personal opinion.
Cool. And do you have recipes or any like resources online that we can direct people to if they want to learn more about how to eat better, how to look after themselves?
Yeah, so probably the best place to get hold of me is on my website, 2mealday.com, which is the number 2mealday.com. If you're interested about intermittent fasting, there's a ton of free resources there. I do also have a paid meal plan, which you can purchase, but there's also a ton of free information there. So that's probably the best place to check it all out.
Cool. Thanks, Max, for dropping in
and
having a chat. We're actually going to do a switcheroo now, so Max is going to ask me some questions about strength training and endurance training for mountaineering. So that's going to be hosted on his channel. So if you want to go over to that link up in the top right hand corner there, you can continue the chat with us. We'll see you there.